Another concern that comes up often is a moral and ethical concern. It may be legal, but is it right? And some people will argue, well, it's fundamentally wrong, regardless of what the law says, to allow machines to make these life and death decisions. This is a really complex and interesting issue. I will say, quite frankly, when we first worked on this issue in the Pentagon several years ago, we focused really on what does the law say. We didn't get too in-depth into these legal issues, these ethical issues. As I've worked more and more on this over time and dug into this in researching the book and talking to others, I think these are some of the most interesting and difficult problems to grapple with. Because war does raise some very difficult moral and ethical choices. I'll give one example from my time in Afghanistan. We were operating as part of a Ranger sniper team up on the Afpak border with Pakistan, and we were trying to monitor infiltration routes from foreign fighters coming across the Pakistan border into Afghanistan. And one morning, very early on, we'd infiltrated at night under cover of darkness, and the sun came up. In this part of Afghanistan, at least, there was not a whole lot of cover, not a lot of trees were above the tree line, and the rocky outcropping we're behind did not conceal us as well as we might have hoped in darkness. And it was very clear that the village underneath us could see us. And it wasn't long before they had sent a little girl to come scout out our position. Now, she had a couple goats in tow, but it was pretty clear that she was there to do reconnaissance on us. She was maybe 5 or 6. She wasn't honestly very sneaky. She was like staring at us as she kind of walked around us. And we watched her, and she watched us as she kind of did a long circle around us. And eventually she left, and it wasn't long after before some Taliban fighters came along afterwards. So we took care of them, and then the gunfight that ensued brought out the whole valley, and so we eventually had to exfiltrate. But later we talked about what we would do in a similar situation if we found this. And one of the things we talked about is, well, maybe we would try to apprehend the civilian, maybe we'd pat them down, see if they had a radio on them. If we were compromised, we'd try to understand if the enemy knew where we were. One of the things I can tell you did not come up was the idea of shooting this little girl. It was not a conversation we had. Now, what's interesting is it would have been legal under the laws of war. The laws of war do not set an age for combatants. Whether you are an enemy combatant is determined based on your actions. And in this case, she was participating in hostilities by scouting for the enemy. Now, the fact that she was a little girl and she didn't know any better, she didn't understand what she was doing, that doesn't change that under the laws of war. She's still an enemy combatant. So if you had programmed a robot to follow the laws of war, it would have shot this little girl. Now, is that consistent with American values? Is that right in that instance to do that? This raises a really difficult question about how robots would deal with ethical considerations in war and how they might know the difference between what's legal and what's right.